I'm so happy to have everybody joining us today for this amazing conversation. Have you ever wondered how companies treat people of color? You might also be wondering what this has to do with you. Our guest today will unpack this. We are excited to have you here with us today. This conversation is going to be instrumental. I am looking forward to you all meeting my co host today. We value your feedback, your opinions. Please drop them in the chat. We intend to respond to as many comments and questions from our audience as possible. This takes a great deal of effort to pull off, so I'm eternally grateful to all of my loyal guests. Every week, we create new content, and we look forward to you subscribing to our YouTube channel to keep up with us. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a DEI personal consultant and EQ coach. And today, I have my special co host here with us, who was going to introduce us to what he does for a living. Join us for this courageous conversation about helping BIPOC job seekers. Today is a trailblazer in his own right, and I will let him introduce himself in his own unique way. Echo, welcome. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's actually echo like the sound.
Echo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, and how are you?
I'm fantastic. To introduce myself to your fantastic listeners, I'm Echo. I'm the founder of Inside Voices. Inside Voices is an online platform that helps job seekers understand how companies really treat people of color by letting them hear from current employees.
Okay, so let's dive in. You said it helps job seekers get a real understanding of how they're being treated in those companies. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we zoom in on organizational level outcomes related to race, whether those be representation in leadership, whether those be pay equity or inclusion. And we ask people that are currently in the workforce, what are the outcomes that you see, and what are your personal experiences, so that those of us trying to decide where to work can figure out whether the environment is really going to be conducive towards the progression and development of our careers.
So it gives the company, no, so the employee is giving the feedback about the company that they work for.
That's right.
Oh. And how does that translate for the job seeker?
So if you think about any job that you're applying for, trying to get information on what it would actually be like in the day to day is extremely difficult. You don't have, in most cases, anybody that you can ask that doesn't have an incentive to lead you down a path that serves their own objectives. The person that's interviewing you has reasons to tell you things. The person that's recruiting you has reasons to tell you things. And we already know that the company's website is going to paint a very rosy picture of what it's like to be there. There are questions that you will have, anyone would have, about working at a company that it's difficult to get answered without speaking to someone who works there, who you can reliably trust to tell the truth. Now, when it comes to conversations about race, that's even more acute. It's almost impossible to get that kind of information. And where sites like Glassdoor have tried to solve the problem for the general public, sadly, they fall down when it comes to getting an understanding of what it would be like to be a person of color in those organizations, because most commonly, they just don't know how to ask the right questions and guide people down the right set of concerns to really paint the picture. So at Inside Voices, what we do is we ask current employees to anonymously tell us about how their company rates on certain metrics, like I said, representation, overall diversity, inclusion, etc. And then we ask them whether they would recommend their company to a person of color and why. And that why gives them the opportunity to talk about all of the important factors that would lead them to say that this is a place that I think you can safely come to and succeed, or here's some information about the company that an outsider would just never be privy to that should probably be known when you're making a decision about whether to come and work here.
Right. And the name of the company is public?
Yes. So the name of the company is public. Your responses are the responses to the multiple choice questions are aggregated. So we just give a score for each of these subtopics. The company gets an overall score out of 5. And the free text response to why you would or wouldn't recommend your company to another person of color, that's posted on its own anonymously on the company page.
It's posted anonymously on the company page.
That's right. Every company gets its page with its score and with its written reviews. And those, we don't include your department or your race, your age, any of the information that we have that we use for data analysis purposes. None of that is included with the review. The review just sits up there on its own. And we ask that reviewers don't include the names of anybody outside the C-suite in their reviews, because that would also be another way to identify people. And anonymity is extremely important to providing the safety that's necessary for us to have this conversation.
Right. And what's the difference? And you probably mentioned this before, but so for the audience just coming in, what is the difference between Inside Voices and Glassdoors? What sets you apart?
Yeah, so partly, we have the disaggregation of Glassdoor. As we've all gotten more comfortable with online reviews, we start to wonder, well, where do I get the reviews that speak to the part, where do I get the review? Where do I get the reviews that speak to the things that I care about the most? If you go to Glassdoor, you probably have to sift through a couple hundred reviews to find reviews that talk about race. And actually, that's even less common now. We commonly hear from people that they've written a review about racism that they experienced in a company. And if they write the word racism, often if they write the word bullying, they find reviews have been taken down, because Glassdoor allows companies to take down, to request reviews be taken down and to respond to reviews without their response being reviewed. However, your review of a company on Glassdoor goes through 2 levels of review before it's posted. So censorship is part of the problem, but there's also just cultural competence. On Glassdoor, you're asked to review diversity for a company. 1 star how many stars out of 5? And that's just it. Now, first of all, diversity is not just race. Diversity is also gender, disability, etc. 7 diversity subtopics. To give them 1 5-star rating just not clear what that number would actually represent.
Right.
We know lots of companies are great at gender diversity, for example, and terrible at other types of diversity. So what is the rating for? And also, how is that actually going to impact my life? A company like Amazon, for example, if we talk about racial diversity overall, Amazon is actually quite a diverse company. But the reality is you look up the ranks, even if you just move from their warehouse and frontline workers to their corporate office, there's a complete difference in the makeup of those workforces. And as a result, the people that are getting paid the most, the people that are the most senior, are all look a certain way. And then the people that are getting paid the least look a certain way. That kind of detail is not included in a 5-star rating for diversity. And that is something that you want to know when you're going to a company that's touting itself as very diverse, to get there and find out that actually your chances of making it to the C-suite, for example, are actually really low.
Okay. So so their chances are very low. But then when the job seeker so you don't have star ratings on Inside Voices invoice.
We do have star ratings, but our star ratings are at a level that is actually helpful. So we have an overall star rating for the company's racial diversity. And then within those, we have star ratings within each of the subtopics that we've identified, from fairness in pay, inclusion, representation and leadership, diversity of the workforce overall, and a few others. And those are to point people towards the area of a company's diversity performance that they consider to be the most important for making their decision. You know, you may be joining a company and you may be very ambitious, and what you want to know is that after I join, do I have a reasonable expectation? Can I have a reasonable expectation that I can fulfill my goals and rise through this organization? Great way to tell that is to look at who's already in leadership. Do they have any diversity in leadership? Or you may say, I actually don't want to get promoted, but I do want to make sure that I'm getting paid fairly. So maybe pay equity is more important to you. Or maybe you just want a place that actually feels safe. And maybe inclusion is more important to you. You can't get that level of disaggregation elsewhere.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier, you know, depending on which route the job seeker is taking to be able to acquire that job or that position, you know, it's either through a recruiter or a job site. And once you get to the interview, you know, you think to yourself, what kind of questions can I really ask that will allow me, one, to get the job, and two, to show up as my authentic self? And if you want to show up as your authentic self, I think those questions are probably imperative, but sometimes in the back of your head, you feel uncomfortable. So I think this platform is really crucial for us to be able to navigate a safe space and to know what we're getting ourselves into.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And, you know, people are becoming more cognizant of the fact that an interview should be two-way. We should be interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing us. But the reality is that it doesn't feel safe to ask all the questions that you want to ask in an interview. And sadly, you know, most interviewers are not equipped with the education or the incentive to give you the information that you need to understand whether it's a safe space for us.
Right. So take us step by step on what that would look like. So, for example, I go to, I think your website is, what's your website URL?
Insidevoices.io.
Insidevoices.io. Okay, so bring me through the step. I'm the job seeker. What is it that I do, and how do I know what is it that I need to do, and then what is it that what would make me feel safe and going to your website?
Sure. So two types of people that'll be coming to our website: job seekers, those looking for information, and reviewers, those looking to provide information. And in a way, we like to combine those two. So let's be a job seeker for a minute. Typically, people come to us when they are in or around the first interview. At this point, they don't generally just come to research companies to apply to. They usually come when the company's shown some signal that they're interested in having them come work there, whether that be inviting them to interview or inviting them to apply. And at that point, the person is then questioning, oh, do I actually want to work here? And that's when you land on our site. You first asked whether you want to read reviews or learn more. And that's because we'd like to ask people to, even if someone's come to write a review, we'd like them to see what reviews look like, so they can get an idea of what they're setting themselves up for. So let's assume you decide to read reviews, and you'll go to our list of companies, and you can either filter by industry or you can search for the company name. You search for the company name and you land on the company's page, and on there you'll see a 5-star rating overall for the company, and then the rating for each of the diversity subtopics, the DEI subtopics for the company that we have. Within each subtopic, you'll also see the distribution. So you'll see what percentage of people were rating the company for each of the stars. And then as you scroll down, you'll see text boxes, which will show the free text reviews for the company. Now, you'll only be able to see the introduction to each text box at the beginning, because we ask that users sign up to read the full reviews. And after signing up, you're able to read one review in full. If you'd like to read more reviews, we ask that people contribute, because this is a circular economy for all intents and purposes. You know, to make this sustainable, we ask people to review the company that they're currently working at or most recently were working at, to be able to access unlimited reviews on the site. So after writing your review, you can then return to the page. You'll be able to see all of the reviews for that company. And if you decide that company isn't right for you, all of the reviews for the next company that you decide to research. In reading the written reviews, you can actually like a review to indicate that it was helpful. So you'll typically find that the reviews that are the most helpful are the top 1, 2, or 3, as they're the ones that have been upvoted.
They're the ones that have been uploaded.
Upvoted, sorry.
Oh, upvoted. Okay. And so there is a membership fee attached to it if they want to see more reviews. Is that what you're saying?
No fee. It's very important to us that we all be able to access this information. So the sign up is free. The only thing that we ask is that you sign up and you write a review. Cost nothing.
Right. What gave you this brilliant idea? I'm sure it's the burning question that we all have. What was it that helped you give birth to this amazing platform?
Yeah, I worked at EY for over a decade. And when I decided to leave, I spent a lot of time choosing the next company that I wanted to move to. I rejected a lot of companies before even, I wouldn't even apply to companies for whom the job description was sent to me, because they just didn't fit the criteria. And then I found a company and it matched all of my values from the outside. They had a brown CEO. They said they cared about diversity. They had a reputation for treating their people well. They were actually ESG focused, which is very important to me. And they were small enough that I felt I could have impact on the culture. And despite many of those things being true and me being able to have that impact on the culture, the diversity was not as important to them as it had been portrayed. And that was something that I could live with. I got my hands dirty and I started getting involved and I helped to push that agenda forward. But then I came up against my own situation where I was being discriminated against by a manager. And I raised that with the company, thinking that, or hoping that, given my standing at the time, given my prominent position in the company and its very recent vocal support for its Black employees in particular, that this may be an opportunity to demonstrate that a company could stand by its values and do the right thing, even siding with the less powerful person in a discrimination complaint. And sadly, they failed to do so. And this pushed me out. And on the way out, I spoke to colleagues who, had I been able to speak to before, I would never have joined the company. And they made me realize that the reputation that the company had externally was false, that I was the last in a line of people to have this experience, line of Black people to have this experience. And that just generally the ethos of the company was not necessarily what I thought it was. And I could not find a good way to make sure that nobody else that looked like me would fall into that trap in the future. And so I built one. Inside Voices came out of personal need. I lost a lot of sleep going through that experience. I was continuing to lose more sleep, feeling like I was just going to leave the door open for another one of us to have that experience.
That's amazing, because you, I love all of it, and I think that's how we give birth to our projects, is by living a certain circumstance and an experience that oftentimes is traumatic. And when you have time to reflect, because now, Ian Lavazan wrote a book, I believe it was 20 years ago, in the meantime. So you were, in between finding your superpower, which I remember reading on your LinkedIn bio, your superpower, and also being an introvert, because an introvert is really someone who's processing, who's observing, right? And someone who's aware of their surroundings and aware of what needs to be done. People often mistake introverts as shy, but I don't believe introverts are shy. They're just processing a lot of information and trying to get, all this, all these juicy nuggets around them in a space where they can understand. So when you did this, what was the next step? So you had this thought, you put everything together, and you didn't want anybody else to go through what you went through. What happened next?
Next, I had to figure out how to build. I didn't at the time have the personal expertise to build this. And I went through a lengthy process of tinkering away on the side, trying to find somebody else to build it for me, trying to build it for myself, trying to take my dream, my vision of having a place for us to share the truth and figure out what does that actually look like step by step. What are the pieces that need to be included, and what are we not getting from what already exists? So I went into deep discovery and then learned how to build it, and then really just started frantically attacking the problem of trying to get it built. Initially I actually asked a friend to build version 1, or I guess actually version 0.1. And I had another friend build version 0.2. And in the end, the version that you see, I built myself, because getting really close and getting my hands dirty was the way that I could really have the impact and bring my own dream to life. And there's still a lot of ways for us to go in terms of making this as useful as it could be for people who are seeking this information. We're never going to have the hundreds and hundreds of reviews at a medium-sized company that Glassdoor may have, because this is not for everybody. This is for those of us who understand and appreciate this problem, who are intimately close to this problem, and as a result can write helpful reviews. But we are looking into ways that we can make every review more helpful and allow people to identify trends when there aren't dozens and dozens of reviews, when there are less. Because even if you're joining a company that's not a household name, you should still be able to, it may even be more important for you to be able to understand what it is like to work there before you get there.
Right. I think it's amazing because, and I'm going to have to correct you only on this, you probably will get 100 million viewers and 100 million ratings. Why do I say that? Because your intention is authentic. And for anyone like you and I, who looks like you and I, that especially after the murder of George Floyd, we really woke up and realized how we were being treated and how we're being micromanaged, and how we were, a token in the company. I think all this time spent at home during the pandemic really made us reflect. So I would really, love for this to be blown out of the water, because now it's come to light and life. And we, as brown and black people, have come to terms with what is really happening in some corporate spaces. And I think this is going to be really something that everybody should put their hands on, and to be able to work in a safe space, because this is really what we want. We want to be in a psychologically safe space to be able to be productive and to feel welcomed and included. And I believe this is the only way, because we, like, it's the same when someone's looking for a therapist. I think the person needs to be interviewing the therapist as well to see if they're well aligned, right?
Right.
It says a lot when you come prepared to an interview to ask these questions, and you realize that you're getting shut down, or someone, they're saying something that you only want to hear. I think your platform is going to give us the solution that we all need.
Thank you. Well, yes, I hope we all use it in the millions. I hope everybody sees the utility. I would say, I think there are some of us who doubt the need or the relevance. Is this going to help me? Does somebody else's story, how relevant is someone else's story to mine? And I would say you're not necessarily going to have the same experience as everybody who looks like you in an organization. That's why every story should be taken, one, with a grain of salt, but it should also just be another data point in how you're deciding what you want to do with your life and where you want to spend your time. But I would also caution, first of all, that our questions are intentionally focused on outcomes for the whole organization, rather than just outcomes for the person writing the review. This is about taking the insider information and sharing it in a way that can be helpful, not just sharing what is happening in your own personal experience, but what do you see happening around you? And that's really relevant, if you think about my story, because up until a certain point within the organization I was in, I would have written, if I had just written about my own personal experience, it would have been a glowing review about how I had been treated. But at the same time, I knew that my coworkers, particularly the Black women that I worked with, were not having the same experience that I was having. They were on different teams and they spoke about the company very differently. And so if I were to write a review from my own perspective, it wouldn't be as useful, but a review about how I think the organization behaves and performs, that can be helpful. And so for anyone who questions whether this can be useful to them, I would say you may not see yourself in every other individual's story, but you can see yourself when you hear about the whole, and there's nowhere else that you're hearing about that whole. If we don't start sharing this information, there's no incentive for companies to improve. We need to be able to act on the information that we receive and vote with our feet about the kind of companies that we're ready to join.
Right. And what do you want the audience to take away?
So, for a long time, well, for the last year and a half, we have been in the space of helping job seekers to improve the way they search and validate companies. Companies do a check on you, you should do a background check on them. What we have found from reading reviews, lots of reviews, is that lots of people, when they do talk about their own specific story, they have very similar stories. Lots of us are having the same experiences. And that it's showing that companies, in a lot of cases, have absolutely no idea how to help us resolve issues, how to support us when we're going through problems. They don't have the cultural competence. And that's even when they do have the motivation, which that's a separate piece. So we're actually launching a new product that actually targets companies, that helps them support the employees of color that they've already gone out and invested in and recruited. Because the first part is to get us into the company, sadly. But in most cases, they have not fixed the environment that led to them not having enough employees of color in the first place. And so we are working on helping companies retain the employees that they bring in, so that we can have the experiences that let us stay long enough to be promoted and to work our way up through the ranks, so that we can finally see some representation. So what I would say to your listeners is, if you're a company that has an issue with retaining its employees of color, reach out to us. Drop me an email, hello@insidevoices.io. We can start talking about having your company join us on a mission to not just improve diversity recruitment, but really improve equity and inclusion in companies so that we can improve diversity overall.
Absolutely. And the retention, as you said.
Exactly.
And when do
Reten-
we look forward to it? Go ahead.
Retention is a huge part of the problem that we just don't talk about. Black and brown people leave their companies 30% faster. That means that our resumes have more jobs on them. For the employer who doesn't like a job hopper, that puts us at risk. And we're leaving companies that we joined excited to come to. So it's time for those companies who've already invested in us to find a way to support us appropriately. And at Inside Voices, we think we found that way. And so we're eager to get started. The new website that speaks about the new platform will be up tomorrow. But in the meantime, if you want to reach out to me, you have my email, hello@insidevoices.io. And from tomorrow, you'll be able to see on the site more about our new offering and how we intend to help companies finally retain employees of color so you can get some representation in leadership.
Oh, I love all of it. I love all of it. Congratulations. We're looking forward to the launch. I'm so excited. As we reach the top of the Diversity Connects Us hour, I want to thank you all for listening. This podcast highlights lived experiences and inspirational stories of strength and tenacity. We share profound and courageous dialogues that influence DEI and emotional intelligence by breaking the barriers and labels of stereotypes, confronting biases, and offering best practices to achieve a more significant and cultural mindset. Stay tuned as we continue to share our voices in the DEI space. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic.